When ideas fail, words come in very handy. Goethe. Today, I want to talk about failure. By the way, DZ Tribe, welcome. Josh Thomas. I want to talk about failure today because failure is often misunderstood and it's actually optional. Failure is optional. It is not something that you have to accept. You don't have to say, failure, I failed at something or whatever. Failure is an option. Maybe you've heard it said a bunch of times, failure is not an option, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, fine. But it actually is an option. And it's an option that you can allow, or it's an option that you can deny. Because the only time that you really are going to fail something is if you quit. I think sometimes the word is misapplied to certain situations. The only time you're going to fail is if you quit. If you stop trying, you will fail. If you think about this, when you were in school, there were probably, maybe this was you, or maybe you know somebody like this that, I failed the sixth grade. I had to repeat it. Okay, well, you didn't really fail it. You just didn't pass it yet. When you have to repeat the sixth grade. Okay, cool. Well, I didn't fail it. I just haven't passed it yet. So I'm going to keep trying until I pass it. The only time you're going to fail is if you don't pass sixth grade and you just drop out of school and you go and work in the coal mine, like my grandfather did. My grandfather, actually, very interesting story, went to 2 days of ninth grade, and then he was like, screw this. This is hard. Learning's hard. I'm just going to go and get a job. So he goes and gets a job, works manual labor his entire life. And he couldn't be happier because he went out and did what he wanted to do. Did he fail? Well, he failed ninth grade. But I don't think he's really failed at anything else. He just changed his priorities and he's doing something else. Failure is an option. And you can choose to let failure consume you. How many times in your life have you allowed yourself to believe you've failed at something and you let that consume you? You let that drive your decision making. You let that dictate your feelings about yourself, your self-reflection, your self-esteem. How many times has failure ruined you? How many times have you failed a relationship? Did you really fail, or did you just not succeed the first time? Because the only time that you really fail is if you quit. Now, walking away does not necessarily mean you're quitting. Sometimes that's the best decision, but that in and of itself is not a failure. It's just a shift. It's just an adjustment. Just like my grandfather, he's like, this school thing, not for me. I'm going to go over here and do this instead. That is a pivot. It's a shift. It's an adjustment that you're making. Is it a failure? Only if you allow it to be. Only if you apply that word. Failure only happens when you quit. Now, I want you to think about this in an entrepreneurial sense. How many times have you tried something that did not work? How many times have you experimented with a new concept or a new business model and it just didn't pan out? Was that a failure? Did you fail? Or did you try something that you haven't figured out how it works yet? Try and focus on that tiny little mindset shift. Change your mind, change your vocabulary, because your vocabulary and how you talk to yourself and about yourself can be your greatest asset. It can also be your mortal enemy. If you allow the concept of you being able to fail to enter your mind, then that failure will become real. And once that failure becomes real, it grabs a hold of you and it doesn't let go until you tell it no. Failure is optional. I'm not going to fail. The only time that I fail is if I quit. So think about that today as you're going through your day. I want you to think back to 3 or 4 instances in the past where you considered that you failed at something. Did you really fail? I want you to critically ask yourself, did I really fail at this? And if the answer is still yes, okay, let's go back and dissect it. What can you do to turn that failure into a lesson? What can you do to turn that failure into a success? What can you do to turn that failure into a stepping stone or a platform that is going to dig you out of that hole that you put yourself in because you allowed yourself to believe that you failed? What is something you can do right now, today, to convince yourself that failure is optional? That'll do it for today, guys. We'll see you next time.